Okay, so here we find ourselves at the last chapter, or the last lecture in Chapter 5, and we'll look at the muscle tissues and nervous tissues, and then we'll do a little brief review, or wrap-up, and that'll be it. So let's get started. Muscle tissues are composed of, usually often composed of large cells, and we're thinking here primarily of skeletal muscle, of large elongated cells, and they're specialized for contraction. That means that the cells can become shorter, and when they shorten up, then they also get thicker around. And as that muscle shortens, it pulls against the attached ends. So the ends of those cells are attached, sometimes to a skeleton. If it's skeletal muscle, it could be to another muscle if it's in the heart or in the digestive system, say the smooth muscle of the digestive system. And there are three types of muscles in the body. There's skeletal muscle cells, there's smooth muscle tissues, and cardiac muscle tissues. And so we're going to look at these three individually. And I should probably say that the book only gives a very short, brief introduction to both the muscles and to the nervous system, because they will get a lot of airtime later on as we work our way through the rest of the book. So we'll look first at skeletal muscle, and the picture I show you here is only a portion of a skeletal muscle. This would be very long. If we could see the whole skeletal muscle, it would be very long. Imagine your own muscles. An individual cell within, say, the biceps brachii, the large muscle that causes the arm to be, the forearm to be brought closer to the upper arm. So that biceps brachii, every muscle fiber, every muscle cell that's found in the biceps brachii runs the entire length of the biceps brachii. So they're very long cells. And they form the flesh of the body, the muscles do. And usually skeletal muscle attaches to bones. And most skeletal muscle is controlled because of conscious effort through nervous impulses. And so we talk about it as voluntary muscle, skeletal muscle, because we can think it and make it move. And these cells are very long and thin, and they are, what does that word mean? Multinucleate. That means they have multiple nuclei. And so what you're seeing, these dark parts here, those are the nuclei that are found. And usually they are around the periphery of the cell. And when you look at skeletal muscle under the microscope, it appears striated. See the stripy pattern that runs across the cell this way. And that's because of a very unique arrangement of the protein fibers inside of that muscle cell. And we'll talk a lot more about that when we get to the muscular system. So that's skeletal muscle. And just to review, it is voluntary striated muscle. So we talk about it in those terms. We have conscious control over it, and it's stripy. Smooth muscle, because it lacks striations, appears smooth. Smooth muscle cells are much smaller than skeletal muscle cells. For instance, here's one with its nucleus. We describe them as being spindle-shaped. This is what a spindle would look like. It's the part of a spinning wheel where you gather the wool as it's being made into a thread. It's the thing that Cinderella pricked her finger on. So it tapers at both ends. That's what we mean when we talk about it as being spindle-shaped, and it has a single nucleus in each cell. Now, smooth muscle, you cannot think it to contract. So you can't tell your digestive system, okay, squeeze food from the stomach into the small intestine, please. And therefore, since it doesn't respond to thought commands, to conscious thought commands, instead it contracts under either local control. If you stretch smooth muscle, it tends to contract, or it responds to unconscious nervous stimulation. And so we talk about this kind of muscle tissue as being involuntary. So it's involuntary and non-striated. I should have put that word in your notes. involuntary and non-striated. And we find smooth muscle tissues in the walls of all the hollow organs of the body, including like the stomach, the intestines, the urinary bladder, the uterus, the gallbladder, the blood vessels. They're all lined with this involuntary, non-striated smooth muscle. The third kind of muscle tissue, then, is the cardiac muscle. And, as the name would suggest, it's only found in one place, in the walls of the heart. And these cells, like smooth muscle cells, are small, and they are like skeletal muscles, striated, but unlike skeletal or smooth muscles, they're branched. So this might be what an individual one of these cells looks like. And so they've got those same stripes because they've got that unique arrangement of the protein fibers that smooth muscle cells don't have. And they connect and they interconnect with each other throughout the heart. And so one cardiac muscle cell may interconnect with multiple cells. And that connection between the two cells, and there would be one here connecting to another muscle cell, this would connect to a third, this would connect to a fourth muscle cell. So you can get lots of connections. But that connection is a specialized connection called an intercalated disc. Intercalated disc. Try saying that yourself. Well, I'll say it with you. Intercalated disc. And now you say it on your own. Hopefully that was good. So these intercalated discs are built of desmosomes for flexibility and gap junctions so that they allow ions to move back and forth. And because of this, those gap junctions especially, and here is an intercalated disc, here's another, there's intercalated discs all over this image. And unfortunately, it's harder to see the striations in this particular image. But if you look right here, right there in those areas, those are the striations I'm talking about. And if you keep looking here to the left, where I'm kind of circling it with my little white dot, you can hopefully make out those striations. So the gap junctions there at the intercalated discs allow the signal to contract to spread easily from cell to cell. And because they're so branched and interconnecting, the whole heart will contract in a very uniform, rhythmic way. And like smooth muscle, cardiac muscle is involuntary. So we think of cardiac muscle as then being an involuntary, striated muscle tissue. Okay, so those are the three muscle tissues. Skeletal muscle, which is voluntary, striated. Smooth muscle, which is involuntary, non-striated. And cardiac muscle, which is involuntary and striated. Nervous tissue, again, we're just giving it a very brief look, is found in the brain, the spinal cord, and what we talk about is the peripheral nerves. So these are the nerves that extend from the spinal cord in the brain and then return. They also have a function bringing signals back from the body to the spinal cord and brain. So those are the peripheral nerves. They go out to innervate the periphery of the body. And in nervous tissue, we see two primary cell types. There are the neurons, and these are the cells that do the communication that we expect from our nervous system. They generate and conduct what are called nerve impulses along very long processes called axons, and they send their messages to one of two places, either to muscle cells or to glands. And so the only thing that the nervous system can tell anything to do is it can tell a muscle cell it's time to contract, or it can tell a gland that it's time to secrete. And so here is a neuron. We're looking up close. I'll outline it. This is the neuron. This is probably part of the neuron here. These are dendrites off of the neuron. And then here's the long axon. Oops. Drew right through it. There we are. There's a little neater. There's the long axon. So here's the cell body with its central nucleus. And then it gathers information, gathers signals from other neurons through these dendrites. They bring information to the cell body. And then if we receive enough stimulation at the cell body, that leads to an impulse being sent out along the axon of the cell. So axons, and these structures here, we'll just give them a name. They're dendrites. There's a second kind of cell grouping called neuroglia. There are many different kinds of neuroglial cells. But these are smaller cells that support and insulate and protect the neurons. And so these dark circles here, these are the nuclei, and there's more all the way around in the mess that's of fibrous stuff that surrounds that neuron. Those are all the nuclei of the neuroglial cells. And again, they support, they will insulate, preventing weird electrical signals getting to the axon, and then and protect the neurons themselves. All right, so there we are. That's chapter 5, all done. So let's just look through, review briefly the important points. First, we talked about how cells are organized into tissues, and we described the three primary intercellular junctions in tissues: gap junctions, desmosomes, and it's been a long time since I talked about those. Desmosomes, gap junctions, and there's a third. You're on your own to go figure that out. And then we discussed the 4 major tissue types in the body. Then we talked about the first of those tissue types, the epithelial tissues. We looked at the general functions and the characteristics of epithelial tissues. And then we looked at how you can identify the types of epithelium that are found in the different organs of the body. We talked a little bit about glandular epithelia and the classifications of glands. And then I'm not sure why that says connective tissue. Epithelial tissues. So we described the general characteristics of the epithelial tissues, all the different types. I think I've already said that, though. Then we talked about connective tissues. We compared and contrast the components of the connective tissue, the cells, the fibers, and the extracellular matrix / ground substance. Remember, ground substance plus the fibers equals the extracellular matrix in each of the types of the connective tissues. And then we looked at the major functions and the characteristics of those types. This should have been down here. Somehow it got up above. That's probably what I was trying to do. Okay. And then finally we talked about the different body membranes, the 3 epithelial membranes and the 1 connective tissue membrane. And then we talked about the 3 types of muscle tissues, the skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle, and then the types of cells that we find in nervous tissues and the general characteristics and functions of those nervous tissues. So there you are. If you have questions about these, please either email me, chuckbowling@mcdowelltech.edu, come and see me during office hours, or make an appointment to see me during some other time. And great. Hopefully things will go well on this next exam.